You've quit habits that were already working. Not because you're weak, because a good day is quieter than the ordinary noise of a life, and when you checked and felt nothing, you were reporting accurately. Over the next 30 minutes, I'm going to hand you the whole machine, piece by piece, so you can build a 5-year change without ever needing to feel it work. The last piece is where the compounding curve is actually steepest, and it sits nowhere near the gym or the savings account. Almost nobody thinks to fund it. None of it is usable yet, though. First, you have to see why the change is invisible, because the invisibility is built into the method on purpose, and it says nothing whatsoever about you. Take the version of you who reads 10 pages tonight, and the version who doesn't. Line those two people up tomorrow morning, and nothing on earth could tell them apart. No blood test would show it, no bank statement, and neither would 5 minutes of conversation with someone who knows you well. Line the same two people up in 5 years, and they don't recognize each other. Different work, different rooms, and the way of talking the other one wouldn't recognize. And the entire gap between them gets built inside a window of time so small you would throw it away tonight without noticing you'd thrown away anything at all. The arithmetic first, said slowly and only once.
1% better, compounded 365 times, leaves you roughly 38 times where you started. 1% worse over the same year leaves you at roughly 2.5% of where you began. Same year, roughly the same effort, opposite ends of a life. Now, let me be straight with you about that number, because everything else I say depends on whether you trust me here. A human being is not a savings account. You don't have a fixed rate, you don't compound cleanly, and nobody in history has become 38 times better at anything in a calendar year. That figure is a picture of direction, not a forecast. It tells you which way a small repeated thing points. It does not tell you where you'll land. Hold it honestly, and the real problem comes into focus. Practically no one quits compounding for want of believing the maths. The maths is easy. We quit because we cannot perceive it, and there is a precise reason why. Every recording studio has a noise floor. It's the low hum a room makes when nothing at all is happening. The air handling, the building's electrics, traffic 2 streets away, the faint hiss inside the cable itself. And this is what matters about it. A sound quieter than that floor is not faint. It isn't a small signal you have to strain for. It is absent. The microphone cannot register it.
You can turn the gain up as far as it goes, and all you will get is more hum. Your life has a noise floor too, and it is loud. How you slept, whether the commute was bad, what someone said in a meeting that you're still turning over at 4 in the afternoon, the weather, whether you ate properly at 11. On any given day, those things move how you feel and how you perform by an amount that dwarfs anything one workout or one chapter could possibly do. So one good decision produces a signal well below the floor, which means that when you finish the run or close the book on page 10 and you check in with yourself and feel exactly the same as you did last night, you are not being impatient. You are being accurate. The signal is real, it is under the hum, and it will be under the hum tomorrow as well. So change your evidence standard before you touch a single habit. Stop asking whether you feel different. That question is unanswerable at a one-day scale, and it will talk you out of every worthwhile thing you ever begin. Ask one question instead, and let it be brutally simple. Did the action happen? Yes or no? Judge inputs, because inputs are the only thing in this entire system that sits above the noise floor. Which leaves the question that actually ends people. How long does the signal stay down there? Longer than anyone tells you.
And the number most often quoted is the one doing the damage. There's something that happens in a dark room that isn't a metaphor at all. It's chemistry. When light hits film, The photograph is already there. The exposure rearranges the silver halide crystals in the emulsion, and what's left behind is called a latent image, a complete encoded photograph that is entirely invisible. You could hold that strip up to a window and see nothing whatsoever. It takes the developer to amplify what is already sitting in the film, and until the developer does its work, there is no evidence at all that the picture exists. Someone leaning over the tray 20 seconds in would swear the shot had failed. The photograph was there the whole time. The evidence hadn't arrived yet. That gap, full price paid, nothing delivered, is where most of us quit. And I want to be careful here, because quitting there isn't weakness. It's a reasonable conclusion drawn from an unreasonably small sample. There's a figure people love to quote about habits: 66 days. It comes from research by Philip Alali at University College London, and it's roughly right. 66 days was the median time for a new behavior to become automatic. The range is the useful part of that study, and it is the part nobody quotes. Some people got there in about 18 days. Others took 254.
That's under 3 weeks at one end and the better part of a year at the other, in the same study for the same kind of habit. Now put that next to the person you've been comparing yourself to. Your friend who felt it click in 3 weeks is not evidence about you. Her number tells you nothing about your 7th month. And if you've been quietly measuring yourself against her, you've been running a calculation with no information in it. Picture a woman doing 30 minutes of Portuguese a night after her sun goes down. She does it for 9 months and privately believes she has wasted a year of evenings. She can order coffee, she cannot follow 2 people who are actually talking to each other. Then she's in a taxi in Lisbon, arguing cheerfully with the driver about a football result, and 3 full minutes go by before she notices she hasn't translated a single sentence in her head. Nothing clicked that afternoon. Nothing was different about that taxi or that driver. The developer had simply, finally, hit the film. So decide your horizon before you start, and write it down somewhere you'll find it again. 6 months, a year, whatever's honest for the thing you're building. Then refuse, flatly, to grade yourself before you reach it. During the lag, adherence is the only legitimate scoreboard you own. Results get judged at the horizon. Effort gets judged today.
Everything so far has assumed you're trying to build something, but the machine doesn't only run when you're building. It's running right now, on whatever you actually did today, and its direction is being set by defaults you never chose. The 1% goes in reverse just as reliably as it goes forward. Everybody knows that part. What gets missed is that the reverse is far more dangerous, and not because it moves faster, because of what it does to the instrument you'd use to detect it. In 2003, a study led by Hans Standongen and David Dinges did something simple. They took healthy adults and restricted them to 6 hours of sleep a night. 6 hours, not 4, the amount a great many functioning adults consider a slightly short but perfectly survivable night. They kept it up for 2 weeks and measured cognitive performance the whole way through. The performance fell steadily, and it kept falling. By the end of the 2 weeks, on the measures they were taking, those people were performing at a level comparable to someone who had gone 2 full nights without any sleep at all. Then the researchers asked them how sleepy they felt. Their ratings barely moved after the first few days. They were impaired to a degree that tests could measure clearly, and they reported feeling basically fine. That is the exact shape of every compounding decline. The decline isn't hidden from you.
The thing measuring the decline is declining at the same rate. Your standard drops alongside your performance, so the gap between them never widens, so nothing ever registers as wrong. You don't feel yourself getting worse. You feel normal. You feel normal the entire way down. Picture a restaurant where the walk-in cooler drifts 1 degree warmer every month. Nobody notices, and nobody is being careless. It's arithmetic. Every cook tastes today's food against yesterday's, and yesterday's was tasted against the day before. The reference point moves along with the food. There is no morning where the sauce is suddenly wrong. There's just a slow slide, and then a review 18 months later saying it isn't what it used to be, and a chef standing in his own kitchen who genuinely cannot name a single thing that changed. From the inside, nothing did. And it's the reason the fix has to come from outside you. Install one external reference point you cannot argue with, a number you log, so that the number remembers what your memory won't. A recording of yourself from a year ago. A person who has your permission to tell you the truth, and whom you've agreed in advance not to punish for using it. Your internal gauge drifts along with you. That makes it excellent for living and useless for detecting drift.
And that aims at something uncomfortable, because it aims at the plan you're already forming. If the gauge drifts, then the version of you who decides at 6 in the morning whether to go for the run is the same compromised instrument, which means the whole strategy of deciding well in the moment was never going to hold. So stop asking that version of yourself to decide anything. This is where nearly everything we've been told about self-discipline turns out to be pointing at the wrong organ. We picture the disciplined person as someone standing in front of the fridge at 11 at night, jaw set, winning. The research doesn't show that. In 6 studies published in 2015, Brian Gala and Angela Duckworth found that people high in trait self-control reported experiencing fewer temptations and relied more on automatic, habitual routines. Their good outcomes were carried by habit rather than by heroic resistance. The disciplined person isn't winning the fight in front of the fridge more often than you. They didn't get a gene you missed either. They're mostly not having the fight. And an enormous amount of what any of us does is already running on that setting. Research by Wendy Wood and colleagues found that roughly 43% of people's daily behaviors were performed almost every day, and typically in the same context, same place, same time, same cue. Close to half your day is already on rails. The question was never whether to automate your life. It's automated. The question is what's on the rails. A line cook does not survive a 400-cover Saturday night on grit. Ask one. The night is won or lost in the 2 hours before service, when nobody's watching and nothing's urgent, and every sauce is in its container, every garnish portioned, the knives exactly where the hand will reach without looking. By the time the tickets start printing, the outcome is largely decided. Service is just the collection of a debt that prep already paid. 2 men, same age, same job, same intention to run in the mornings. The first decides at 6 a.m. whether he's going, which means that every single day he has to win an argument with a version of himself who is barely conscious, warm, and represented by excellent lawyers. He'll win some of those arguments. He will not win 300 of them. The second man put his shoes and his clothes on the floor beside the bed the night before. At 6 a.m., he isn't deciding anything. He's executing a decision made hours earlier by a rested, clear-headed man with no stake in the immediate discomfort. He steps into it the way you step into a corridor. Same person and the same amount of discipline, but the odds are not close. And your surroundings do this to you whether or not you consent.
In work by Wendy Wood and colleagues on university students who transferred schools, habits that depended on a stable context, exercise routines among them, were disrupted when the context changed, even when the person's intentions hadn't changed at all. The intention survived the move, the habit didn't. That's how much of this lives in the room rather than in you. So move every decision earlier, out of the moment of action where you're tired and honest about wanting to stop, and into the moment of setup where you're rested and honest about what you want. For each habit you're building, ask one question,
and ask it about the wrong day deliberately. What would make this nearly automatic on my worst day, not my best one, my worst? Which leaves what actually goes into the machine. You can arrange the room perfectly and still fail if the thing you've arranged it for is too big, too vague, or hooked to nothing that reliably happens. That is the entire failure list, and all of it is fixable in an afternoon. Start with vagueness because it's the one that hides. In 2006, Peter Gallwitzer and Pascal Sheeran published a meta-analysis covering 94 studies of something called an implementation intention, a plan of the form, when situation X arises, I will do Y. Not a goal, a trigger and a response, written down in advance.
Forming one produced a substantial improvement in goal attainment over intention alone, with an effect size around 0.65, the difference between a plan that mostly gets done and one that mostly doesn't. I'll exercise more, and after I drop the kids at school, I walk the loop around the park are not two phrasings of the same plan. One is a wish, the other is a plan. Second, anchor it to something load-bearing. Attach the new behavior to something that already happens whether or not you're motivated. The kettle is the one that works, because the kettle happens whether or not you feel like anything. 90 seconds of boiling is 90 seconds of standing there with nothing to do. One man I know does his press-ups on the kitchen floor in that window, and he has never once decided to. He just hears the kettle. This is the core of B.J. Fogg's Tiny Habits work, and the logic is plain. You aren't trying to manufacture a new occasion. You're borrowing one that already occurs reliably. Third, if the habit is future-facing and unpleasant, let something present tense carry it. In a study by Catherine Milkman, Julia Minson, and Kevin Volpe, participants who were only allowed to listen to a tempting audiobook while they were at the gym went to the gym more. The workout didn't become fun. It got carried.
And on timing, the researchers Dye, Milkman, and Rees documented what they called the fresh start effect. We're measurably more likely to pursue goals just after a temporal landmark, like a birthday, a Monday, or the first of the month. Use the landmark if one is close. Don't wait for one, because waiting for a Monday is how 3 weeks disappear. But the thing that decides it isn't any of those. It's size. There was a man who had wanted to write a book for 6 years. 6 years of buying notebooks. Good ones, the kind you don't want to spoil with a bad first line. What he changed in the end was not his discipline and not his schedule. He changed the unit. 1 sentence, written after the coffee finished pouring. That was the whole commitment. Some mornings the sentence was worthless, and he knew it while he was writing it, and he wrote it anyway, because the sentence was never the point. The point was that at 7:10 every morning, there was a person in that chair, and a person in that chair will eventually write more than 1 sentence. He never had a discipline problem. He had a unit size problem. So write each habit as 1 sentence containing a trigger, a tiny action, and a place. Then shrink it. Keep shrinking until it would survive your worst week, the one with the sick child and the deadline and the 4 hours of sleep.
If it can't be done on a day when everything goes wrong, what you've built is a mood wearing a habit's clothes. And there's a day coming that none of this survives on its own. Not the hard day, the one after it. Compounding is almost never destroyed by imperfection. We all know that in principle. What kills it is abandonment, and abandonment gets triggered by the story you tell yourself about the day you missed rather than by the missing. Researchers Janet Polivy and Peter Herman documented this in dieting and gave it a name that stuck, the what the hell effect. People who believed they had already broken their diet went on to eat substantially more than people who believed they hadn't. The calories were incidental. What did the damage was the breach of an all-or-nothing rule. Once the record is blemished, the record stops being worth protecting. You've felt this. Everyone has. Day 41.
A man is in an airport with a delayed flight, 3 time zones from his own bed, and for the first time in 6 weeks, he doesn't do the thing. 1 day. That's the actual damage. 1 day out of 41, a completion rate any reasonable person would take. He deletes the app by Friday. He loses the next 300. He lost it in a sentence he said to himself in that airport, some version of, well, that's ruined now. And notice what that sentence quietly assumes.
It assumes the streak was the game. The streak is a scoreboard. A scoreboard that punishes you for being a person is a badly designed scoreboard, and you're allowed to redesign it. Design it so you feel underway, because feeling underway is a lever you can pull on purpose. Nunez and Dries ran a study at a car wash with loyalty cards. One group was given a card needing 8 stamps. The other was given a card needing 10 with 2 already stamped in. The work required was identical, 8 more washes either way. About 19% of the first group finished their card. About 34% of the second group did. Nothing changed except the sense of having already begun. And do track it, but track the right thing. A 2016 meta-analysis by Benjamin Harkin and colleagues, covering 138 studies, found that monitoring progress toward a goal reliably improved the chances of reaching it. Monitoring works. So give yourself something you can always mark, which means defining the floor version of every habit now, today, on a good day, while you're clear-headed and not negotiating with yourself in a departure lounge. The walk instead of the run. 1 page instead of the chapter. 2 minutes of the instrument instead of the practice session. Not because 2 minutes is enough. It isn't, and I won't pretend otherwise.
Because a chain that gets maintained is worth more than a chain that was perfect until it wasn't. The rule was never don't miss. The rule is that the recovery is scheduled before the miss ever happens. Which brings me to the last piece, and to a question I've been holding back. What should you point all of this at? Because you can do everything I've just described aimed at the wrong domain and collect a fraction of what was available. Start with money, because it's the clearest visible case. Warren Buffett began investing as a child, somewhere around 11 years old, and by the figures most commonly cited, well over 99% of his net worth arrived after his 50th birthday. Not because he became better at 50, because the curve had finally had enough time underneath it. His whole story is runway. Plenty of people have been brilliant, and you can find several of them in any university library on a Tuesday afternoon. He was simply in the game for 70 years instead of 20. Money is easy to believe, because money has a statement and a number that goes up. Try the same idea somewhere with no statement at all. In John Gottman's research on married couples, stable relationships showed roughly 5 positive interactions for every negative one during conflict. 5 to 1 while arguing.
And the couples who lasted were the ones who habitually turned toward each other small bids for attention. The offhand remark about a bird outside the window. The half sentence about a bad kneeing. The "look at this" held up from across the room. The couples who didn't last, didn't. A marriage is very rarely lost in an argument. It's lost across 10,000 small moments where someone said something and nobody looked up. That's a compounding account with daily deposits and no statement, which is exactly why it's the one that gets neglected. Coldness has nothing to do with it. There is simply nothing to check. The same shape shows up somewhere you'd never call an investment. A project manager, 4 years in the same company, answers every email inside a day and does what she says she'll do by the date she said it. That's all. There's no achievement to point at in a performance review because nothing dramatic has ever happened around her, which is rather the point. Then a role opens 2 floors up, and in a conversation she isn't part of, 3 separate people say her name without being asked. She has been paying into an account whose balance she has never once been allowed to see. And this is where the curve genuinely steepens, because these accounts aren't separate. Sleep improves judgment. Judgment improves work. Better work brings better opportunities.
Better opportunities reduce financial pressure. Less financial pressure improves sleep. That loop is the real engine, and it's why one habit in each of 4 domains beats 4 habits stacked in the one domain you're already good at, which is, if we're honest, where most of us put them, because that's where progress feels best. So spread your 1% and start treating micro moments of attention as deposits. The reply, the look up from the phone, the thing you said you'd do by Thursday, done by Thursday. That's the highest interest account you will ever hold, and it costs about 4 seconds a time. There's one more return on all of this, and it's the reason the curve bends the way it does. The psychologist Daryl Bem proposed something called self-perception theory, that we work out what we believe and what kind of person we are in much the same way an outsider would, by observing our own behavior and drawing conclusions from it. We aren't reading an internal file. We're reading the record of what we've done, which means every repetition is doing 2 jobs at once. It's practice and it's evidence, entered quietly into a case you're building about who you are. There's an old puzzle with exactly this shape, and it's worth half a minute. 1 grain of sand is not a heap, and adding a single grain to something that isn't a heap surely can't make it one. Run that argument forever, and heaps become impossible. And yet, heaps exist. Something happened, and no single brain did it. That's becoming a runner. No single run makes you one. Adding 1 more run to a person who isn't one can't make them one. And then, on an ordinary Tuesday, you say the sentence out loud, "I run in the mornings," and you don't flinch, and it's simply true. And you couldn't name the run that made it true. Once the identity moves, the inputs change on their own. A man who has read 15 minutes a night for 2 years doesn't only know more things, he asks different questions in meetings because he has more to hang them on. People start bringing him different problems. 18 months later, he applies for a role he wouldn't have believed was meant for him, and gets it. The 15 minutes didn't produce the job. The 15 minutes produced a person who applied. So choose your habits by the person they'd make you, not only by the outcome they'd get you. And start counting your repetitions as evidence, out loud, in the first person. I'm someone who trains. That isn't a lie you're telling early to trick yourself. If you've done the reps, it's a conclusion you're entitled to draw from data you've already collected. I'm not going to give you the ending this genre usually gives, the one about how the 5 years are going to pass regardless. You know that. You've heard it, probably from someone who was selling something, and it didn't help. The harder version is this: there is no neutral setting. Compounding isn't a program you enroll in on a Monday with a start date and a welcome email. It's already running. It has been running all day today on whatever you actually did: the scroll, the sleep, the conversation you had properly instead of half-having, the walk you took or didn't take. The defaults are earning interest right now, in one direction or the other, at a rate you cannot feel and did not consciously choose. So the question was never whether to start compounding. It has only ever been what. Which brings us back to the habit you quit while it was still working. It was under the hum, sitting there the way a latent image sits in the film, complete, 20 seconds before the developer reaches it. And the only thing that actually went wrong is that you ask your senses a question they were never built to answer, and then you believed the answer. You can stop asking it tonight. Before you sleep, do one small thing. Name one thing you did today that's quietly earning, and one thing you did today that's quietly costing. Don't fix either of them, and whatever you do, don't buy a notebook about it.
Just be able to name them, because that naming is the external reference point, and everything in this recording depended on having one. Then let 5 years do what 5 years do. If this was worth half an hour, there are more of these. Subscribe or just let the next one play. and come back to this one in a year when you have something to compare it against. The comparison was always the whole point.